Hello and welcome to the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast. The intention of this podcast is to open your mind, get curious about yourself and connect to the power you hold within. I am your host, Karen Maloney, an inside-out coach, helping you to believe in yourself and manifest your desires. Check out the podcast, available on all platforms, and go to my website, www.karenmaloney.com for all info. Hello everybody. Welcome back and thanks for tuning in for another episode, and hope you had a chance to catch up on an episode last week where I took a week off because my brother got married, so I had no new episode, but we're back to business again. And my guest this week is Bill O'D, and Bill is a passionate Irish mycophagist who's been running mushroom hunts in Ireland and abroad since 1996. He also speaks internationally at mushroom festivals in Spain, France and Turkey. As well as his love of foraging mushrooms and other wild foods, Bill enjoys sharing his knowledge on the fascinating, amusing and sometimes horrific aspects of fungi and their relationship to the planet and other natural kingdoms. His hunts in Ireland have been covered and recommended by RTE TV, TV3, TG Cahir, Irish Times, The Irish Independent, The Examiner, Sunday Independent, Sunday Times, The Sunday Business Post, Food and Wine magazine and many others. Bill studied fungi at UCD and he is an active member of the Association of Foragers and an Irish delegate for the slow food Salone del Gusto. He runs several public mushroom hunts in autumn every year and is also available for private events. And he has enjoyed sharing his passion with many different groups, including chefs, universities, slow food, and mushroom or food festivals. It was a pleasure to connect with Bill and talk all things mushroom, and he shared his first encounters with mushrooms and also the fear and the phobia that mushrooms brought up in people, because there was a lot of misunderstanding and really poisonous mushrooms as well. So even he mentioned that he remembered from his childhood coming home with mushrooms and his parents were terrified and told him to go bury them in the bottom of the garden because they could kill us all. But he became more curious and fascinated when he lived in the States for a while, and he still carried this fear of mushrooms and mushrooms that he didn't know, and he was introduced to so many more different varieties that he learnt and really became fascinated about mushrooms. And this is what we explore in this conversation as well, from some of the role mushrooms play in the environment or in the world as a whole, medicinal mushrooms and magic mushrooms, and the benefits that all of them have and can bring to people who experience them or use them. He also spoke about how mushrooms have been around for 1.2 billion years. So they have withstood a lot of evolutions and they're still here and evolving, and I'm sure that adds to their potency. So much in this conversation, and it connects to the bigger picture as well of how we are all interconnected and the spiritual aspect of mushrooms as well. And that remembrance that we are all in one big ecosystem. And when we remember that and extend that empathy and compassion to others, to nature, to what we don't understand, a whole other world opens up. So a really brilliant conversation with Bill. I really enjoyed it. And you can find out more on his work on his website, which is www.mushroomstuff.com. But as always, I will have it linked as well from the show notes on my website, karenmaloney.com, and click the podcast section. So enjoy this conversation. And as always, if anyone wants to explore some of their own inner world and become more self-aware and have that curiosity towards themselves and why they are the way they are, or why things are the way they are within themselves, within their lives, and would like to make some changes in that, reach out. I currently have some openings for some one-to-one coaching or silent counselling. So pop me an email, support@karenmaloney.com, and we'll connect. Enjoy. Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining for another episode. And thanks, Bill O'D, for joining me as well. And first of all, you're very welcome and thanks for joining today.
Hi, Karen. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Even from our little brief chit chat there before we hit record, we're like, we better hit record or we'll have the whole fascinating conversation. Nobody's heard it.
Yes.
I'm really excited to delve into your work today and to learn some more. And your website is mushroomstuff.com, and you work in the field of mushrooms and fungi or fungi. I don't know which way is the right way to pronounce it, but maybe if you just share a little bit in your background or what brought you to your fascination with mushrooms.
Yeah, I was brought up in a fungophobic society in Ireland, really, where people were afraid of mushrooms and had no knowledge of mushrooms, and where you either had the field mushroom or everything else was potentially very poisonous. And even when we started off doing mushroom hunts here, 20 years ago, people were, everyone assumes, oh, this is magic mushrooms and that kind of stuff, So there was, society has changed a lot since, but back in the day, that's when I suppose I first started to get involved with mushrooms with my parents and going to pick field mushrooms in Galway, and I love that. And in those days, people would go to fields with sheep in them. It was the guideline, which probably meant it was unimproved pasture, and you'd pick the mushrooms, and it was such a thrill and a seasonal thing, and they were so tasty. And I can remember back even then that you'd have kids along the side of the road with these strings of mushrooms for sale.
Wow.
And people would actually pull over in their cars and buy them. You don't see that much anymore, but that would probably be my earliest memory of interest in mushrooms, and then after that, and we'd eat together then. And I remember my parents would talk about their memories of eating mushrooms, and mushrooms on the range with a bit of salt and this kind of stuff. So there was a kind of a tradition of the field eating the field mushroom. And then I
Wow.
remember bringing home mushrooms one time myself as a very young kid, and my parents freaking out, like it wasn't, we don't know what kind of mushroom that is, so we better get rid of it and bring it down to the bottom of the garden and bury it. And so there was that ignorance, and that kind of spurred me on even more, that I want to know more about this, and I was more curious. So that was kind of the start. Then I suppose I learned more about mushrooms when I was in the States. I lived in the States for a few years, and people would bring me. I like to cook and that, and people would brought me mushrooms, and I said to them, "Oh, you can't eat those. Go down to the bottom of the garden and bury them. They'll kill us all." And they said, "No, no, no, that's not true. These are very tasty mushrooms, So I would, so I learned then about other mushrooms, and kind of took it from there.
Amazing. And then what just even to touch on, and obviously it's a huge subject, but what is actually the power of them? And even within the environment, and that there would be such a level of fear and phobia and like, oh, seriously, go bury them at the bottom of the garden because we don't know what might happen. What
Yeah.
is some of their underlying potency?
Well, yeah. I mean, there are mushrooms out there that can kill you horribly, and they can kill a few of you horribly with a relatively small amount of mushrooms. And so those experiences probably occurred, and in an island, a small island country, that was, probably reinforced by one or two events like that. Whereas if we lived say if you lived in France, you see, like the whole of the continent, all of Europe and into Russia and Eastern Europe, Russia, all the way back into China, India, they all have very positive view of fungi, and they eat them in season and they have knowledge of fungi. But I think because we're an island, a few bad experiences, and people, weren't integrating with other cultures. Whereas if you were in France, you were doing business with the Catalans, or you were doing business with the Spanish, or you were doing business with there's no, the Asturians or the Cantabrians, and everyone probably knew their own safe, one or two safe mushrooms.
Mm.
So the knowledge was being shared, and we were saying, oh, we eat this one and that one, and they say, oh no, we do, we eat different ones. Have you ever tried these ones? So that'd be kind of my view as to what probably generated the fungophobic attitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same in the UK. The UK is fungophobic as well.
Wow. Well, just since you've mentioned that again, do you see it changing? And has it changed
Well,
over
yeah,
the
it
years?
has. It has changed, and I mean largely due to the new Irish and all the great. Not only are we getting new genes, and which we're well
Mm.
overdue, but we're getting new cultures and learning things from other cultures now that Ireland is more open and what's the word? Cosmopolitan isn't the right word,
Mm.
but we're now we're more involved with other cultures.
Yeah, yeah, true. We're not so insular in our own little bubble, just listening to all the fear stories.
Yeah,
Yeah,
recirculating the fear. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
now we
yeah.
have great. Polish people are so passionate on mushrooms and other Europeans, and that they're so it's we learn. We're learning
Amazing.
from living with them and being around them as well.
And then, is there a theory, or did I just make this up, that we all started from mushrooms or mycelium or fungi, the
Yeah,
world,
no,
or
that's correct. We're on the same evolutionary branch as fungi,
Mm.
so we are of fungi. Um, they precede animals on the planet, but animals are on the same branch as opposed to plants, which are on a different branch. So,
Ah,
in fact, we are closer to fungi than we are to plants. Or fungi are closer to animals than they are to plants. Whereas we assume they're a kind of a type of plant,
yeah,
but they're not. They're in a different evolutionary branch with animals. So yeah, we are an evolution further on the evolutionary branch.
wow.
Yeah,
Um, and then again, was there a moment where you really became fascinated with these tiny little mushrooms or these little
yeah,
fungi that you were like, wow, they hold so much potency, whether good or bad, and you really wanted to learn more about them?
yeah. And we start off by teaching people usually just about edible mushrooms, and we refer to some of the other stuff, edible and poisonous mushrooms, with a view to them being able to gather mushrooms to eat. But you soon realize that they're more or less pervasive. Fungi is pervasive everywhere, and it's involved in everything. And you realize that, like for example, fungi is really, if you look at a tree it has a mycorrhizal relationship with fungi at the root level, and a tree gathers its nutrients. It can't move like we do. We move, we find food, we eat it,
Mm.
we internalize it, and it's broken down by all the fungi and bacteria in our gut and that. Whereas trees are like us inside out. They have the fungi and the bacteria out around their roots, and it goes and searches for all the nutrients and feeds them back to the roots of the tree, and that's how the tree gets a lot of its nutrition. And when you think about that, fungi and they have the ability to actually extract nutrients from all kinds of things. Everything from rotting wood and leaves to even stone. Fungi can
Wow.
actually extract nutrients. They've got these strong chemicals that can actually break down stone
Wow.
and extract nutrients from stone. So they're very powerful in terms of all the different substances that they can produce. So whether that be to produce nutrition, or even from a medicinal point of view, people take them, or poison, things that are poisonous to us. They're highly toxic and complex molecules. and everywhere they are, they seem to be able to dominate and thrive
Wow.
because of that competitive advantage. It's one of their competitive advantages,
And is
it's all pervasive. Like fungi is
wow.
everywhere.
Yeah.
If you look at your garden, if you look at say even just a patch of grass, and you see all the fairy rings and things like that, that's
Mm,
all generated by fungi in the soil, breaking down nutrients and exchanging the nutrients back with the grass and the plants around it. And the more once you start down that road, it's kind of like going down the rabbit hole.
the rabbit hole. Yeah.
But it's real. It's with fungi. It's real. There's a lot of research done on this,
Mm,
and it's part of our food. It's we need fungi like yeast is for bread. We need to ferment things like yogurt, and a lot of our foods and medicines come from
wow.
fungi as well.
Yeah, safe to say they played an important role. And I can't remember the word you used there as well, how they kind of take over. And it seems what you've been sharing very beneficially so. Like, would it be safe to say that, maybe a lot of plants or wildlife may not exist if it wasn't for fungi to have that ability to take nutrition from whatever's around? But then does it ever go the other side where, I don't know, they take something over, but in a more negative sense?
Yeah, yeah, because you've got parasitic fungi as well. So they
Mm.
will ultimately kill their host, or they take from the host, so
Well,
yeah, it
yeah,
does.
okay.
It goes both ways.
Okay, yeah.
But
And then
I
up,
mean,
yeah.
they're orchestrators in terms of. So in a woodland, a forester will tell you that what's going on under the soil is more important than what's above
Mm,
the soil, and you've got it's interesting because you've got fungi with different mycorrhizal relationships with the tree roots. So you've got say things like say a birch boleach is got a mycorrhizal relationship with the birch tree, and then you've got other mushrooms that have specific mycorrhizal relationships with other specific trees, and then you've got other ones that don't have any relationship with any tree, but they're in the middle and they have relationships with the mycorrhizal with the other fungi,
mm,
and they're actually brokering the exchange of nutrients between the mycorrhizal roots for the specific trees, if you know what I mean. So it's actually kind of brokering and orchestrating the exchange of nutrients across the forest between different trees under different
mm.
circumstances. So it's really quite complex.
Yeah, and there was something, and it's not Fantastic Fungi, which is out recently enough. I remember seeing another documentary. I can't remember what it was years ago, in that, and again, it was just mind blowing to me. Going, wow, they're actually a highly complex network. That's yeah, fascinating. I didn't go down the rabbit hole so much, but it
Yeah,
was really like, wow, this is incredible.
yeah. It's a good rabbit hole. I suppose the rabbit
Yeah.
holes become negative. It's kind of people getting obsessive about the conspiracy. But this
Mm,
is true. This is all
yeah.
science verified stuff.
Fascinating.
It's,
Fascinating.
and it is fascinating to the point of like being spiritual, really,
Mm.
because it's all present. It's and when you see the complexity of how everything interacts, it's just you understand and respect nature and the beauty of nature even more. To bringing it into a spiritual understanding, it's beyond our normal world, which we
Yeah.
just see things as fairly straightforward. We're under the
Mhm.
impression that if you go out and spray weed killer on your dandelions in your garden, that gets rid of your dandelions and your garden's now a better place. You don't understand that they're all part of
Mm.
this complex ecosystem
Ecosystem.
that's and so important to all of us that it doesn't break down. That it works.
For
Unfortunately, it
sure.
has broken down. It largely due to mass poisoning of the soil,
Mm.
the
Yeah.
commercial farming. Kind of the big commercial farming of millions of acres of land.
I know. I know. And it's so funny, even just what you mentioned there. I found that even the more I've learned about myself as a human and how we operate and going down that rabbit hole and other different things, I'm like, oh my God, the more I learn, the more I'm like, we're actually clueless to the complexity of everything, and
Yeah.
especially nature. And we are nature. It's like we think we know it all, but
Yeah.
it's so vast and mind blowing, but also, yeah, really interesting to see it all in
It's
operation. But again, like you say, we
yeah,
need
and
not to be destroying it.
we have this arrogance.
Yeah.
It's the ordinary people have an arrogance that they know and have the right to decide what should live or what
Mm.
should not.
Oh, I
We
know.
should kill rats, but we like bunnies.
Yeah,
We should kill grey squirrels, but red squirrels are sacred. We don't want to kill them.
I know.
Who the
It's
bloody
true.
hell are you know?
It's true. It's true.
And the
Because
reality is that everything is doing its job. Everything is it's all part of a very complex
absolutely.
system.
Absolutely. Everything exists for a reason. Even
Yeah,
when we turn it back on ourselves and emotions, and, everyone's trying to get rid of bad emotions or negative emotions. Like, no, they all exist for a reason. They're not good or bad. They're
yeah,
serving a purpose. But again, it's for us to kind of open our minds and to be more curious to learn about how it operates as opposed to trying to, distinguish or not feel such thing or kill off this animal, like you say, it
yeah,
is there is method to everything. They all exist for a reason. And even me, sometimes in Mexico, if I see a mosquito, I'm like, oh, here, seriously. I try to have that compassion going, okay, it's not for me to kill you either, because you exist for a reason as well, even though
yeah. But
sometimes
I mean, it's well, like I think it's understandable to kill a mosquito if you have a mosquito in your room. I think it's
thankfully
okay
I
to
don't have too
napalm
many,
the
but
room.
yeah, yeah. But I
but
do try to think of it sometimes, and then I'm like, oh God, I'm sorry, but
but don't kill an entire swamp.
yeah, 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 yeah.
As they do.
Yeah,
They'll
they'll
fly
try to
over with
eradicate the
planes and
whole species.
helicopters will spray the entire. Now I know
Mm,
that there's diseases and things like that, so there are justifications for some of these things, to suit our own welfare, for
mhm.
humans. But
Yeah.
I think that the part that's a lot of it is just ignorance.
Yeah.
It's arrogance, and arrogance is a form of ignorance, and people
Mhm.
just feel that they can willy nilly spray poison around the place and kill the fungi in the soil, and because they want their lawn to be even. They don't want
Mhm.
fairy rings. They don't want to see. I mean, people. I know there's a neighbor of mine, and we have mushrooms here in a kind of a communal green that I watch, and she goes out and stamps on them. I said, "Why do you do that?" And she said, "Well, I don't understand them. I don't know what they are." She said,
Oh,
Get rid of those mushrooms. How do you get rid of them?" I said, "Well, if you don't
awesome.
understand," I said, "I'll tell you what they are. That's not the response. You don't understand it. You kill it."
Isn't it classic? Like, and that's so sad and so unfortunate. It's if you don't understand it, that's totally fine, but either leave it be or go ask, go find
Yeah,
out, be
find out.
curious.
Yeah.
I that word is amazing. Like, and it's been such a shift for me in my life. If I can approach everything with a curiosity as opposed to trying to, label it one way or another, again, a whole world opens up. So yeah,
Mm.
that's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down. So
Yeah.
we'll bring it back to
And by the way, why are we just going down rabbit holes? Why don't we go down rat holes and foxholes as
yeah.
well?
Exactly. But then I suppose a lot of people as well, their knowledge, and especially I find, with the opening of like health food shops and things like that, mushroom knowledge, maybe in one sense in capsule form, has changed. Maybe the ones on the ground people are still wary of, but the likes of medicinal mushrooms and magic mushrooms, most people would know of. But maybe we'll touch on medicinal mushrooms first. And are many of them native to Ireland as well, say like the reishi or lion's mane or cordyceps? And what are the power of those medicinal mushrooms?
Yes, like those that you mentioned are native to Ireland.
Oh.
We even find lion's mane, but they're not common.
Mm-hmm.
So there are. I mean, some of those mushrooms. I mean, probably the most common one that you will see is turkey tail, and turkey tail grows all over,
Mm-hmm.
and it's relatively easy to grow, and it's a mushroom that's been used medicinally for thousands of years. We have Chinese people who buy turkey tails from us here
Wow.
and send them back to China because the quality of the turkey tails. We have European certified organic
Mm-hmm.
turkey tail, and
Wow.
the air quality in China I think is poor. So there's problems with mushrooms. Mushrooms can absorb heavy metals and that. So, but yeah, they grow here and they're used for they're immunomodulators, so for regulating your immune system, and they're also used to many people. I mean, there have been many studies done on how they can benefit people who are suffering from cancer,
Mm-hmm.
um, different types of cancer. Now, I'm not allowed to say that you're not allowed to say
Yeah.
that they can help,
Yeah.
but people use them for that. And in our experience, have some of them they certainly help. Um, but it's interesting because if you go to Japan, the extract of turkey tail is used in treating all cancers and paid for by the
Wow.
state.
Oh, wow.
You know, because culturally they aren't fungophobic, I suppose. Plus they're not. See, the problem, I suppose, with our medicine system is that it's so expensive to get anything approved,
Mm-hmm.
and understandably, you have to go through these clinical trials that can cost, it can cost you 100 million to get a pharmaceutical on the market.
Yeah.
So when someone comes along and says, well, these mushrooms have been used to treat this or treat that, no one's kind of open to hearing that. None of the big pharmaceutical companies want to know that because they have to be in a situation where they can patent something and get a return on having brought it through the cost of getting it to market through the clinical
Mm-hmm.
trials and all that. But that said, with turkey tails, there are clinical trials going on in the States for treating breast cancer and that.
Wow.
But they take they take money and time. But yeah, that's turkey
Absolutely.
tail, and I mean lion's mane is another one that's being used quite a bit. It's neurogenerative, so
Mm-hmm.
people are using it to treat everything from stroke recovery. Now we have a couple of people who swear by it in terms of stroke recovery, and that it has helped them hugely. But again, we can only say that that's anecdotal.
Mm.
Anyone who's interested should look up. There are trials that have been done, credible published clinical trials that you should look up online. Um,
Absolutely. And like that, there's so many as well. And I'm sure like that, you just mentioned two there between turkey tail and lion's mane and, how they are being used for certain things in different countries and different aspects. But I'm sure as well, a lot of people can take them preventatively as well as like
yeah,
a supplement just to help them with
yeah.
everyday kind of
Many people,
general well
many people
being.
do. Yeah, and we see all these drinks and that now, coffee and things like that. With they have some mushroom in them,
Mm,
not much. What we sell is just pure mushroom,
much,
and
yeah.
you can add it to your coffee if you want, or
Much.
to your
Yeah.
cereal if you want. It's just powdered. It's dried and micronized to make
Mm,
it bioavailable. But yeah, they are, and they're also high in vitamin D, which
mm,
we certainly need. And yeah, so they are. And I mean, I take mushrooms. I take a mushroom supplement every day,
hmm.
and I certainly feel that they benefit me.
Absolutely. Do you have a favorite?
Well, it depends if it's an ailment.
Mm,
I mean, the lion's mane is a good one,
your
and
kind of
it's
go to.
yeah, and it's I think it's good for mood and good for general well being, mental well being. I think in my experience.
Amazing. Well, if it's got that neurogenerative aspect as well, yeah. I mean, we could all do with some of that as well. I think,
Yeah,
we get,
they call it a smart drug. Like it's
yeah,
so you kind of have that. It does have that. I certainly feel it has that effect, and there's lots of stuff online talking about that as well.
amazing. And it's funny, I recently came across something about that and I actually bought it for my mother. That was the first time I'd kind of come across lion's mane in particular. And when I saw the neurogenerative and how it can help with creating new brain cells, I was like, obviously for myself as well. But I was like, oh, I'll get that from mom. She'd love that now as well. But it,
Yeah, and it's also with things like some of the awful diseases that people get, MS and things like that. It seems to be beneficial as well, and
they're powerful because, again, aren't they adaptogens as well? They will kind of do what's needed in one
yeah,
aspect or another as well.
yeah, yeah,
They'll adapt to what's needed in the body.
yeah. Well, certainly there's multiple benefits from them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and I mean because it's back to the us being on the same evolutionary branch as fungi, and so fungi, when you see mushrooms around there, they have to protect themselves from the bacteria and the
Mm,
viruses and all the different pathogens that are out there.
true.
So, but they've been on this planet for I think 1.2 billion years is the current estimate,
Wow.
and so they are highly evolved, and they've evolved to be able to protect themselves from all these things.
Wow.
And
That's a long time. I trust them.
yeah,
I trust them over some of the other things that are just new.
yeah, and I mean they've made it through the great extinctions.
Yeah, wow.
Largely because they don't need to photosynthesize, so they don't need light. They can survive
Mm.
without light.
Again, like you say, what's going on under the earth often is way more important
Indeed.
than what's going on over. And like that,
And Karen, here's I don't know how you see the world, but if you look out of a window, if you're on a flight sometime, and particularly you see it in Ireland, I'm sure it's similar in Mexico and most countries. And you look out and you see in Ireland, you see your 40 shades of green,
hmm
all these nice little neat fields with different coloured grasses and things like that. And all that. Most of those fields are dead. So they've been treated with chemicals that kill the soil and kill all the fungi in the soil and more or less render the soil only suitable for growing the specific grass or the specific crops that are being grown in that field. And it's at the point where a farmer said to me a couple of years back, he said that if you pull a plow now, if you plow a field, there's no birds following the plow because there's no worms in the soil because the soil is dead. I mean, what kind
So
of a
sad.
world and by the way, soil is a carbon sink.
hmm
That's so by killing the soil, you're releasing all the carbon that was stored in it.
Yeah.
It's all been so we've already done that. But then you're also by keeping it dead, you're not allowing it to reabsorb carbon, which is an important part of its role. So
Yeah.
the ground is supposed to absorb carbon. A natural soil absorbs it, and we're stopping it from doing it.
Mm.
And
I
then
know.
talking about, well, we'll drive around in battery cars and we'll plant a few trees.
I know.
So
Oh, I
can
know.
we leave things be as they should be, and stop damaging every season they're spraying these places and they're spraying toxins. I mean, they talk about things like glyphosate being sold in millions of tons. You know,
Yeah. Oh, it's so sad sometimes. Like it literally makes my soul cry at times. And even, I'd had someone on from a local organic farm here as well to talk about soil and the importance of it. And then someone else told me recently that Satguru, the big Indian teacher or whatever, he's on a
mm,
global campaign at the moment, all about soil awareness
mm,
and just how important it is. And yeah, it just makes me so sad sometimes. But
mm,
again, it comes back to we think we know it all. We think we're so powerful. We think it's our world. We can do whatever the
yeah,
hell we want. And it's for us to enjoy, but we're all connected in a whole bigger ecosystem. And yeah, everything has a knock-on effect, and we just need to be a bit more conscious.
a
But
lot
then
more.
a lot more, a hell of a lot more, for sure. And then obviously the other mushrooms that a lot of people would know, the magic mushrooms. And again,
Mm,
most people would have the concept that, oh, it's a recreational drug. And I know kind of I have to hold my hand up and say my first ever experience all those years ago, it kind of was that idea. I didn't know
mm,
their power and their potential. But again, on the other side now, there's so many studies being done with psilocybin and how powerful it is with PTSD and helping so many people. So maybe if you talk to
mm.
that as well.
Yeah. It's funny. We had a guy from one of the big pharmaceutical companies on a mushroom hunt with us last year, and he
Mm.
was talking about he has now been appointed. He's head of the psychedelic mushroom section, and he said it's something that they're putting like an awful lot of money and research into. And he said that within a couple of years, it is going to be a normal part of Main Street
Amazing.
pharmaceutical treatments, and so there is a revolution
Mm-hmm.
there. And when you look at the history of psychedelic mushrooms, and you look back to the kind of the Americans banned it back at the kind of Timothy Leary era in the States, where all these people were discovering a new way of living and making themselves aware of things through using these drugs, and they just banned them outright. And even from a research point of view, it was extremely difficult to work with them. So and up to that point, there had been all kinds of interesting studies done on them, and they were seen to be very useful for treating particularly things like chronic depression and addiction and things like that. And so yeah, they're a powerful medicine if used properly.
Yeah.
And but I mean, most people will have encountered them through recreational use, obviously. And but now there's more and more people, under supervised medical situations. I mean, even things
Mm-hmm.
like people coping with, when people are terminally ill and having to come to terms with that. And I know that's another area that they do some of this work with with psychedelic substances that come from mushrooms.
And are there many, many different varieties when it comes to the psychedelic type as well?
Yeah, in
Mm.
Ireland, there's probably, I mean, there could be as many as 20,
Wow.
but typically it's the magic mushroom is the liberty cap that grows in the grass and in the fields, and then you've got a couple of you've got a couple of others like what they call wavy caps and things like that. So yeah, there's certainly a few of them, and then in different countries, like you talk about, I know Mexico has their own types as
Mm-hmm.
well, and you hear of different ones.
Yeah. Well, like I was telling you, I was like, Oaxaca, where I live, is known as the mushroom capital in Mexico, that state. They have so many different varieties when the rains come. And then as well, what makes them psychedelic? What's the psychoactive part? Or then what is it within us as well? Because again, if we don't have something within us to activate it,
Yeah,
is anything going to happen? So isn't it like a two-way thing? It's
is
not just the
yeah,
mushroom, it's
yeah,
us as well. We
uh,
have this.
yeah, yeah. Obviously, like I mean, the imagination part has to be us. The whole spiritual part has to be us, I suppose. I mean, they talk about DMT and things like that, and DMT in the body, and that we have it there anyway, and that these substances just stimulate our own DMT.
Mm.
So yeah, it's obviously something that we that's innate to us, that's triggered by these substances. And in fact, other things can trigger psychoactive
Mhm.
experiences for us, things like hunger, or you know physical exertion. People will start to can hallucinate, or lack of sleep and things like that. And I think it's so we have this substance within us, and it can be triggered by
Yeah.
different things. And
Well,
it must have its purpose. It must be something that's useful to the body and the
yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
soul, maybe.
The soul. Yeah, it's so fascinating. And well, even our breath, breath work. If you like do
Mm,
holotropic or any kind of deep breath work, I mean,
yeah.
you can get there. And I'm always like, our breath is our magic. Our breath is our superpower. But again, we're
Mm.
not connected to it. We take it for granted. We don't realize it's the consciousness flowing through us as well.
Well,
Um,
you see, that's really interesting, because when you think about it, if everything's connected, and the more you learn about fungi, you learn that fungi is more or less connecting everything, at all levels, all living things, and so. you then, if you talk about the concept of a soul, I often feel that we are all from the same, a drop from the same pool, and that
Mm-hmm.
we're really, our spiritual aspect is if a little bit of spirit in all of us
Mm-hmm.
was joined up, that's more or less what God is. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that we have that connection at that spiritual level if we allow ourselves to be open to it. But of
Yeah.
course, our world is all about the physical, and it's all about materialism, and that's what's being promoted loudly to us all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And so we often don't have time to sit and spend time with the soul, or with the spirit, or with the connection between us, or between us and nature, and
Yeah. And isn't that why we're at this point, this crux in time?
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
believe anyway. Even like that, A Course in Miracles will talk about how it's, removing ourselves from body identification to more spirit identification. Because again, we are a spirit having a human experience, not a human having a spiritual experience. And that's not to say we forget about this human body. It's like, no, this is our vessel, this is our tool. But just like you said, it's remembering that higher truth of we're all one, we come from the same. And yeah, bringing that throughout life.
yeah. And I think that's what people learn. And again, I think psychedelic substances. That's one of the things that people get from those experiences.
Mm.
Is that a feeling for that, a seeing that as that's the reality, that spiritual aspect, and that we are all together,
Mm.
and that's something that's needed. Now, that said, people need to be cautious using.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that people should
Yeah.
be going around, having psychedelic trips all the time.
Yeah.
It's they're powerful chemicals, and
Absolutely.
they need to be used carefully. And I have seen the bad side of people overusing them,
Yeah.
and so people must, should be cautious. And some people are, they're not suited really to maybe have those experiences,
Uh-huh.
or if they are under supervision.
Absolutely.
You want to be
Absolutely.
in the hole of your mind, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. No, setting and set is so important when choosing, or if you're feeling called to do any kind of experience like that. And, now my perception has totally changed from, back in the day when I just thought, oh yeah, this is just something you do, like to have a bit of crack. It's like, oh no, these things are actually sacred medicines. But again, to
Yeah,
do it with the respect and to do it in a setting that you feel safe and supported and you're guided, or, you're given maybe the dose or whatever as well. So
yeah,
you're not going to be in that space of like
yeah.
taking too much or whatever. And
It's
just,
kind of,
yeah.
Karen. It's kind of empathy is the word that comes out, that you
Mm,
feel, isn't it? You kind of feel it's an empathy with others, and other life forms, not only just other humans.
totally.
And that's what's missing. That's when you end up with the horrible wars that we've got going on.
Hmm.
How can you couldn't do that if you have empathy with people? How could you possibly justify launching missiles and blowing them to bits, and.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's like once you have that remembrance, you see the insanity of it all because, there is no separation. And yeah, here, I'm here and you're there. But the truth of us, like you say, is all that one same drop. We're all coming from the same place. And actually, I was talking to a friend yesterday who, and use whatever word, I don't mean God in the sense of religion, and like I was brought up in the Catholic Church, but just that source, that omnipresence, that consciousness, whatever people want to call it. He was saying, he was like, if you think about it, this source is just whatever it is, nobody really knows, but it's an essence, it's an energy, it's a consciousness that
Mm,
it can't experience life. It needs us, it needs our eyes. That's how it's experiencing itself, because we're here to experience and to feel and, to share love and kindness among each other. Because without us being here, and, Course in Miracles would say we're an idea in the mind of God, it's kind of nothing. This is the only way it can experience itself. That may seem absolutely batshit crazy for some people, but
No,
some
yeah,
people listening maybe, but it was just so beautiful. And I was like, oh, what another really beautiful way to look at it. But
yeah,
yeah,
it is.
you
But
know,
you see, that's the other interesting part about all of this is that. So I think a lot of us are afraid, and we don't want to know. We're
mm,
afraid, and but what you find out is that it's not only something you shouldn't be afraid of, but it's actually liberating, and it's joyful and full of love. When you
the remembrance.
if you can see that, and if you can see the beauty and of nature and its complexity and how everything works together.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And again, it's like, again, it's like, oh, we're here for a short time. Like we
Mm.
really are. So why do we want to be so miserable and horrible to each other and destroying everything and plundering? Like,
Yeah.
why? You just kind of wake up to the insanity of some things. But also then again, it's the other side, it's like, okay, well, we're all here and it is what it is. And, each person has to choose their path. And even amongst all the fear and the badness, we can still choose to see something different, to bring something else forward, because that's how it works as well. We can't
Mm.
all just fall into the fear bubble, because that's not going to help either. So, yeah, the work. Um, so fascinating, Bill. And thank you so much for joining today. And I will link everything as well on the show notes, but your website as well is mushroomstuff.com.
That's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bill.
You're very welcome, Karen. It was a pleasure talking to you, and keep in touch.